The next job was, after independence, Joint Planning Commission. That, of course, I had the advantage and distinguished my members. One of them is deceased now, Musharraf Hasan and Rahman Saban. There, the problem was different. University teaching, PID research. Now I've confronted with something very different. Policy making. Now, first problem was, how do I communicate with the politicians? Their language and my language is very different. How do I translate my ideas, my suggestions into language they will understand? It's a very difficult job. I was 3.5 years there. It was a tough job. I didn't completely succeed, but I tried my best. I used Rahman Saban, of course, will speak his immaculate English, and I will speak in the very rotten Bengali, so that we can communicate. I had to translate my colleagues' very difficult English into rotten Bengali so that I can communicate. That's what I did most of the time. Bangabandhu had a very interesting remark about me. You see, in the cabinet meetings, he would say, well, you see, any economic subject, there are subcommittees, groups are appointed to examine the issues. He said, I want the aloo to be there. What is aloo? Aloo, you know, potato. You know, aloo, it goes with vegetable, it goes with fish, it goes with beef. This man goes with everything, so put him in. So I was called the standard aloo of all the cabinet committees on economic matters. And aloo was a very appropriate. Later on I thought about it. The man was a genius. Absolutely right, aloo. So I had occasion to attend cabinet meetings which had nothing to do with the planning commission. All kinds of things. Economic agenda, aloo comes in. So I was attending all the meetings. So I had enormous opportunity of seeing the politicians in action on subjects which didn't concern me directly. So that was a great education. Second problem was that the economists think they know the answers. Of course, this is our privilege and our arrogance. The arrogance doesn't work very well. As you grow old, and I learned later on, it's not that we do not know all the answers. Secondly, even if we pretend we know the answers, we do not recognize the political feasibility. An advice to a politician which does not meet his constraints is useless. An economist who gives advice must understand economic constraints to which he functions. Otherwise, his advice is quietly ignored. So that's a very difficult job to learn. I can give you a lot of examples which becomes too technical, but one example would be, we said, you know, there are huge subsidies, food subsidies for industrial workers and low government employees, huge amount. So I said, what is the purpose? A lot of leakage, selling in the black market, and huge cost of administration. So we sent a proposal that let us adjust the wages of industrial workers by the amount of subsidies, so they don't have to subsidies. The wages will be adjusted upwards, right? Okay, I mean, it's a very good idea. Let's discuss it with the trade unions. They said, what? Never. Trade unions in those are very powerful, politically linked to the Awami League. So you have to take their advice. They said, we don't agree. Why don't you agree? It's simple. No, 3 conditions, which I never thought of it. He said, firstly, we don't understand all this adjustment business. We don't understand all this. We get every month so much food, so much rice and so much atta and so much tel. What is all this business adjustment? No, we don't understand this. Second, we got the leaders, well, yes, we give you 10 taka additional because you are not giving this subsidized food. We are also, okay, we understand the logic then. Well, how do I know the employers will implement it? Good question. Thirdly, this today your government, tomorrow there's another government. How do we know they will adjust? So thank you very much, you don't want it. A simple proposal like this was rejected. Why? 3 arguments I giving you. This argument never entered my head. So that is why the political feasibility constraints of economic purpose useless. I don't want to go into other details. There are a lot of other problems exactly like this. Now, one more thing I want to say. Munir, what's the time limit? foreign aid. Interesting. My unread book has all the details of it, but Rahman Subhan already advertised. I hope after this you pay. It's very cheap, right? You can buy it very cheap. Amazon will give you very cheap, maybe $8, $7, something like that. So the question, so I have written great details in these things, but what is my lesson? First lesson is negotiating with foreign donors. You must have capacity, intellectual, professional capacity of a top order. The relationship is unequal in terms of power and influence. So you have to offset them by your intellectual ability. Otherwise, you're nowhere. Correct? This is true of negotiating with big neighbor in Bangladesh negotiation. It's not a subject today. Same problem. You have to be more capable than they are in order to confront them. Otherwise, the initiative in the hands of the donors. Now, I had a problem, not a problem, but one interesting example of politics. Everybody said that in 1973-74, our exchange rate is overvalued. It has to be reduced, depreciated. So, mighty donors fund in the bank. In those days, it was exclusive reserve of the fund. Bank didn't come in very much, but bank joined the fund and started pressurizing the value. So, we, of course, had no problem in confronting it intellectually. I know that the condition is if we devalue, they'll give us aid. Condition, you devalue by 30% or whatever, we'll give you so much aid to adjust the balance of payment, etc. Conditional. So what do we do then? I said, all right, we agree. 3 conditions. Timing will be at our choice. Extent will be our, we can discuss. But more importantly, other policies which support exchange rate depreciation, monetary fiscal policy, they have to be preceding. We will do that ahead of time. And you start releasing money, and then you will do the other one. You show your good faith, we'll show our good faith. But powerful people don't bargain with poor fellows like this. So what happened? I had good contact with the fund. How? In those days, the best and the brightest used to go to Harvard University. Today, it may not be true, it was very true in those days. So I had my classmates all over the world in top positions. One of them was head of the Asia department, a Burmese economist, Thun Thin. The deputy director of exchange restrictions department, who deals with the exchange rate, Shubhibul Mukherjee from India, from West Bengal. So all of these I knew very well from my days. So I used my personal diplomacy. I said, my friend, what's going on here? Shubhibul flew to Dhaka, the man who was dealing with exchange restrictions. He said, I said, what's going on? 1, 2, 3, do you agree with my arguments? He says, my friend, are you arguing in Harvard seminar? We are arguing with fund in Bangladesh. I said, you're all right. So what do you do? He says, politics, my friend, you be calm down. I tell you something. He said, what? I will bargain with you and go and negotiate with them. Because even I have no disagreement, but I cannot sell them. I will be fired. So I cannot sell them. I will say timing, yes, Bangladesh government will decide. Extend, well, 10% this way, 20% this way, we can manage. But release of funds, unless I devalue, they will start releasing. I said, no, we change the fiscal and monetary policy, which is support devaluation. You release it and I will devalue. He said, Shubhimal said, look here, my friend, I won't be able to sell it. Agree with the first 2. Timing, the harvest. It will be after the harvest season when the food price will go down after the inflation. I don't want to go to technicalities, but I'm telling the politics. So he said, look here, personal connection, otherwise it would never happen. He's negotiating now on my behalf with the fund management. This is all right. You see, firstly, you must agree, we are not discussing an education academic seminar. It's politics. Shubhimal and Nurul Islam understand this. Do you? I said, I do. So all right, don't start accusing me that I am not accepting your argument. You're accusing me as a civil servant of International Monetary Fund. Okay. So he went and negotiated. Then he said, you know something, my bargain, I am giving a secret. I'm bargaining power of the fund will get on mine. If I see the Prime Minister, I said, how come? Prime Minister, nothing to do with this. He says, you don't understand. If I go back to Washington, in my back to office report, I met Shakti Guraman, my status will be 50% higher. I understood this much later. Deputy Director actually see the Prime Minister, but he's not only Prime Minister, he's the founder of an independent country, he's a great leader of the world. I met him, Sunny, in my back to report, I discussed with him. My boss will say, this man is a genius. I have bargaining power with them. You understand, those who are international employees, you understand the mechanics of it all. My job depends on my seeing the Batman and reporting to my boss, I saw the Prime Minister. He explained to me in great detail. He said, now look here, with you I am frank. You are helping my job. So I said, fine, I'll take him to Bangabandhu. I said, don't tell him all this. I said, of course, nobody told him. He says, I've come to sir not to discuss in economics, I discuss in Nurul Islam. Sir, I want to see you. Originally, I think he's from East Bengal, Shubimul, I don't remember. He said, I want to pay respect to the great man. He flattered him, and they left. And it worked. He came here, he delayed, timing, etc. was delayed, but eventually couldn't succeed fully, half. So this is the politics of international negotiation, personal contact and manipulation. Economics comes in very later on. Now, I left Planning Commission and went to FAO. Now, Planning Commission is something else. Interesting. I was an economist primarily, right? So in the Planning Commission, I was involved directly. Members are involved in sectors, physical infrastructure, social, education, industry, etc. I was involved directly, personally, aid negotiation and the macroeconomic framework and planning framework, annual development program. But in other areas, even though I was not involved in projects, I had to be aware of the issues involved and policies involved. Otherwise, when I go to as an alu in the cabinet, how do I function? So I have to educate myself. So two things I learned. One, different types of fertilizer. I never heard about this. Ammonium sulfate, nitrogen sulfate, all this kind of, I had to learn all this. The balance of various types of fertilizer. And then pesticides, types of pesticides, irrigation, small scale irrigation, tubal irrigation, low lift irrigation, all these kinds of things. It's strange to me, I have to learn all this. Otherwise I'm going to talk sensibly and argue. Interestingly, education. Well, primary, secondary, tertiary, third. So how do you allocate resources? How do you give? Well, they are interdependent. They are not competing, also interdependent. So I understood the techniques of educational pyramid. Okay. More interesting, family planning program. Now, how do you use the family planning female workers? What kind of training, what time, what will go? So we had a seminar on the subject. And I was convinced, they told me, you see, the best period in which family planning workers can go to mothers, women, and convince them of the usefulness of family planning is the woman is most susceptible to this message before, during, and after childbirth. I never heard of this before. They gave me evidence to show if you send the workers just before childbirth, during and immediately, she is more receptive to it than otherwise. So these are the kind of subject matter education I had when I was in the Planning Commission, nothing to do with economics. Went to FAO. There I was dealing with one sector, all world, entire world, not one government, many governments. And the relationship with all the other UN agencies was under me because of economics issues. WTO, UNCTAD, ILO, my friend, ILO, UNESCO, all of these I had to negotiate. So you negotiate international agencies, you negotiate Now, two issues there are important. One, in the Planning Commission, I was partly jack of all trades. In FAOs, it was entirely agriculture sector, but I had to learn the intricacies of nutrition, technical aspects of nutrition, food safety, all of these, so that I became even more of a jack of all trades. But I most of the time spent on economic issues. But there are two issues which will be important for you to understand. One, the North-South issues I first confronted there, serious one. Trade issues, developed and developing countries, serious conflict. Agricultural protectionism. Then aid issues, all of this under me. I had to negotiate and publish documents on this. And it was a very difficult diplomatic job. And I was right in the middle of South, East-West, the South-North divide. Interestingly, both of you have experience of United Nations organizations, not Bretton Woods, United Nations. One man, one vote, one country, one vote, right? Not like fund on the bank. One country, one vote. But money is contribution by per capita income. So United States gives 20% of the budget, has same vote as Papua New Guinea. Outrageous, isn't it? That was the crux of the United Nations problem. I give 25% because of my income is higher, and you have the same vote as I have, you are a pauper. That tension was terrible. All for 10 years of my life I suffered from this. In various committees and commissions there, developing countries, one man, one vote. Developed countries will get furious, so they will not allow budget. So they will keep the budget restricted to the shortest minimum, because those characters will vote and outvote it. So this is a very serious problem which I don't think developing countries understand this. Having this one man, one vote structure in the United Nations has very serious implications for the efficiency and the resource of these organizations. This is not understood. In national government, one man, one vote, taxes are according to ability, they accept it. But internationally, there is no international government, there is no one government. Why should they agree that the United States pay 25% and the same vote as Papua New Guinea? Outrageous. And that is a very serious tension which unfortunately developing countries do not realize, that you cannot get away with this. So there will be always problem and tension. That I confronted there very seriously. Again, personal contact help. There was a serious kind of United States government. Maximum contribution, but power. Because of voting structure, most of the time, all the time, the director generals are third world countries. Correct? But the money is given by the developed countries. What kind of nonsense is this? So how to handle it? So compromise was a deputy will be an American, and the director general is from majority vote, Asian. First Asian was P.R. Sen, and after that there was an European. My boss was a Lebanese Maronite Christian from Lebanon. And I had under me, my office chief of staff was a Palestinian West Bank, but Jordanian refugee. So it was a very interesting situation. I was the first non-developed country character in charge of socio-political department. It was always held by, so I was the first from developing country to head this department. And I had terrific problem, acceptability. But then I used my again contact, helps. If you are a student in many good university, you have a lot of good contacts. So I had a friend who was Deputy Undersecretary of Agriculture Department in the ministry here, United States. I telephoned my friend, I have a problem. So I went to him. He said, what's going on here? He said, I understand, my friend. Yes, what can I do? He says, Americans are pressurizing me to appoint 3 directors in my department. He says, who is pressurizing you? I said, the ambassador. Okay. So he said, I'll look after it. Again, personal contact, otherwise I would be pressurized to appoint third-class Americans. Then he said, all right, let's have a deal. Since we give all the money, majority money, so you should take from Americans. I said, but then you don't decide who shall I take. He said, all right, we agree that you select your man from the United States, whoever you consider, we have nothing to do with this. The agreement was, yes, Americans, but I will select the best man. That's because of personal contact. Otherwise, they throw you out of the window. So I selected the director of statistics in my department, a very well-known statistician from United States Bureau of Statistics. But then, you see, usually what do? The embassies in Rome, Bangladesh, India, or United States promote their lackeys to these jobs. This is the serious problem in maintaining quality of United States UN jobs. Embassies. So the economic ministers usually get a job in their field. So I was fighting against it. So I went to appeal to the bosses to fix these characters. But that's unusual, isn't it? So, and the Americans were very unhappy with me. They go to our bosses, embassy first hated me because I go to the bosses and fix the appointments. Then I go to, what is the lesson there? The lesson is that accident of history, and unless developing countries realize that this game is not a feasible game, they will be continuous attempts on unresolved country. This is my contradiction between becoming an economist or a policymaker. And I still think developing countries don't understand this. Look at this millennium development, this, pardon me for saying, this circus of this sustainable development. Complete circus. Nobody believes in it. 20 targets and 500 objectives. Nobody takes it seriously. Developing countries least of all. This is complete circus. So what is the purpose of all this? Nothing will be effective, nothing will solve. But we will say Bangladesh has attained the millennium development as if anybody gives it care for it. But the circus goes on and on. Now, when I came to IFRI, I had this complete freedom to do whatever I want as a research advisor, no administrative responsibility. But then I concentrated issues which are politically explosive, which I couldn't do it in FAO. I did it here because again, nobody paid it. What does IFRI do? But later on, university professors, you'll understand, universities here now started becoming consulting firm. Every professor have to collect money for their research program. I'm sure you know that. And IFRI started becoming like that in the last 10 years. Donors now say, conditional, we'll give you $10 million to do research on this. So it is again tied research to satisfy the donors, which is, I am told, the universities have professors now, tenured professors, to go and get money for research from the donors. Donors means the US government, US various associations. So that has become a serious problem now in keeping research program untied to the preferences of the donors. I never had this in, as I said, PID, no problem. In IFRI, in the beginning, no problem. Of course, I'm no longer working as I'm an emeritus professor. The fellow means nothing. I go there and do whatever I like. I am not paid, so I have no obligation. They have no obligation with me. It's just a recognition of my ex-meritus. What is emeritus? It's a Latin word. You are once upon a time meritorious. That's emeritus. Did you know that? That's emeritus, yes. Ex meritorious. Once upon a time you are meritorious, so you give your rooms, all right. Well, thank you very much for all these opportunities and my stories from the prehistoric times. Thank you.